I'm Devin Dabney,
I'm Chris Hampton.
and this is how
Hip-hop taught me
Hip-hop taught me creativity,
playfulness,
humility,
courage,
motherhood.
everything.
Okay, at this point, you all know the deal. If you haven't listened to this week's episode, Doomtree taught me family. Get on it. Because it's a music and talk podcast, it's only available on Spotify. And with Spotify Premium, you're able to listen to the full song, in this case, Team the Best Team, immediately after the episode. Now, before we get into these liner notes, since this is our first group of the season, I don't think we've talked about a group yet. It's all been solo artists, right?
No, we haven't, I don't think.
Okay, I have a pop question for you.
Okay.
Before we get to our actual question,
Uh-huh.
again, same as with the first pop question we did this season, there's no wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a damn near impossible question to answer, but you only get one answer and you get
Only
no
one.
explanation.
Okay. Okay.
Tribe Called Quest or Outkast?
Outcast.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm a Tribe Called Quest person.
Yeah.
That was a hard one. Maybe someday
Yeah.
we'll explain our answers, but not today.
Everyone's like, "You're done, Devin. Your credibility's gone. How could you say that so quickly?" But
no wrong
sorry.
answer.
I don't
No
get it.
wrong answer.
Yeah.
All
It's a
right.
good question.
All right. Real question. What is the best rap song about family? And this can be about a single family member or the idea of family in general. Talk to me.
If you remember when you texted me this question, I said that I had a gut reaction and I was just going to stick with it.
Yep.
So I just picked the first song that I immediately thought of, which is Family Business by Kanye West. That is such a good song. It's like,
Yeah.
I get emotional every time I hear that song. Like, I mean, I really think that, well, at least in old Kanye was in his lane when he was talking about family. I mean, if you think about, that song, Hey Mama, Roses, like he's always doing such a good job of like sharing his feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just that song is so heartfelt. And yeah, I don't know if a lot of people like think of that song when they think of College Dropout, but that's like maybe one of my favorite songs. Yeah. So yeah, that but there's another, gosh, I had another honorable mention. Yesterday by Atmosphere.
Damn, I didn't
Such a
even
good
put that one in my honorable mentions. Totally blanked it.
That's like maybe one of my favorite songs, period. I actually may want to do an episode on it because it is like one of the best told stories,
So good.
It's just the way it's written and the like when you, I don't know, like when the last few bars come and like the story is revealed to you, it all hits you at once. And
Yeah.
I don't know what human being can't get emotional at that song. Like, it's just so good. But yeah, Family Business was the first one I immediately thought of, so that's what I picked.
Yeah, that's funny. I hadn't really connected the dots here, but I have you know how when you hear a song, sometimes it takes you back to this very distinct memory of when you first heard the song, or maybe
Yeah.
just a time you were listening to it and you're like, oh, I remember where I was, what I was doing, what my surroundings
Mhm.
looked like. Yesterday is like that for me.
Man.
The first time I heard that final bit where he kind of reveals the story, my
Mhm.
fucking mind was blown. I can tell you where I was driving. I can tell you
Man.
what street corner I was on. It's so good.
Yeah, Atmosphere is probably like if we had to pick top 10 rap groups, like Atmosphere would be in my top 10 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are just really great storytellers. And yeah, that song is like probably one of my top 10 songs. So
Yeah, totally. All
what
right.
about you?
I had a couple honorable mentions here that just popped into my head
Mm-hmm.
immediately. Family Business, of course, was in my honorable
Mm-hmm.
mentions, as well as Hey Mama and Roses. I don't
Yeah.
know how you can not talk about those three songs. Genius,
Yeah.
Kanye. I also had in honorable mentions Dear Mama from Tupac
Ooh,
and
man, I
Mockingbird
forgot.
from Eminem.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that song in terms of yeah, that's a good family song, that's for sure.
Yeah, great ones. And Hey Mama for me is probably the actual winner here,
Mhm.
but I'm going to get a little obtuse and I'm going to make the case that Wu-Tang Clan Ain't Nothing to Fuck With is the best song about family.
Oh man, how could see, like, I need to expand what I think of when I think of family, because I mean that is how I think about it more as like who you choose, but I just didn't even, dude, I was listening to that song yesterday like
Yeah.
or like Saturday when I went to the climbing gym. That's a yeah, I mean obviously that's a great song.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not specifically about family, like they're not saying, things about their parents or something, but it's like you see this family, you don't want smoke, you know? And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that says enough. And I think that's how we should treat our family.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I think it speaks about family in the sense of like the strength of it, and like look at us together, and that's like
Mhm.
what the appeal of a family is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the core of it, right? Is like feeling like you're powerful in numbers, but you're strong alone, and like just being an imposing force together. You know.
Exactly.
Uh,
You've got this group of people who are there to lift you up and you're there to lift them up. And that's so important. And that this episode, Doomtree Taught Me Family, is all about that for me,
mm-hmm.
because I didn't really grow up with a traditional nuclear family. I did until I was a
Yeah.
teenager, but then I was
Yeah.
very quickly living on my own as a teenager and didn't really have that family unit. So I've had to learn from 15 years old that I have to create my own family. So for me, DNA doesn't really play into it.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I really identified with you on this episode was that I had a very similar situation growing up. You know, I did have I would not say that I had like a traditional family, but I did, you know, by the time I was an adult, I would say I had a pretty good solid, I guess, quote unquote nuclear family. But yeah, aside from that part of my family, I am not connected to really the rest of my family that much at all.
Hmm.
It's always been a very, you know, to put it in short terms, a very complicated situation. And I've always chosen to find people that rather than share the same blood as me, like that share the same values as me, or
Yeah.
like are interested in the same things. I mean, that's just how I am. I'd rather be around people who make me better and like make me want to be like them. I don't know if this makes sense, but I want to be friends with people that I'm like almost jealous of like, damn, like I want to be like as good at this as you, or I want to be as nice as this person, or funny, or cool, or whatever it is. Those are the kind of people I like to be around.
Yeah, I think
um
I think admiration and respect are massive parts of the family unit, If I
mhm.
don't if I don't admire and respect you, what's the point?
Right, right. You know, and why should I like make myself be around people that I don't necessarily want to, or that don't make me better, or that I don't make them better, simply because of something arbitrary like family. Like we
Mhm.
don't, or like blood family. Like we don't pick that. That's kind of the deal, right?
Right.
Um but yeah, I don't know. And some people would argue that like there's something to be said about like you don't choose your family but you love them anyway, blah blah. But I don't know. For me, I've always been like, I want to be in control of my life. I want to choose who I do and do not spend time with. And so yeah, like the idea of what a family is. Actually, you know how in the beginning of this episode you were talking about like Thundercats and Voltron and
Yeah, yeah.
you know, dude, you were really hitting a chord with me because, and my mom will tell you this, like when I was like 2 or 3, from the time I was 8, I was obsessed with the Power Rangers,
Mm, mhm.
like obsessed, and so like it and I think part of it was just that it was like this like group of people that were all pretty dope martial artists, but then they got together and like, they were something greater.
Yeah.
And also just all the fighting and sci-fi shit and all of that I love too. But yeah, I don't know, you were just really like on my wavelength with this episode.
That's funny. I sort of knew I would be, and that's part of why I went down that path. I had
Yeah.
even the initial draft of that episode had even more cartoons in it,
Man.
but
uh,
several of them got cut for what's there now. So
we can have a Patreon where you do like the long form and I'll subscribe and you can mention all of the like cartoon shit that you want. Cause yeah, seriously, do that. I mean, I think that actually was probably my first example of what I thought was awesome as family. Cause like Power Rangers, and then when I started to get into comic books, it was X-Men,
yeah,
like I
yeah,
love that
yeah,
there was like a fucking mob of all these super powered, unique individuals. And then yeah, that's kind of what hip hop is too. I mean, really, for the listeners, this was actually my first exposure to Doomtree. Like I had never listened to them before. I had never heard of them before
hmm
before Kris brought them up. But this album feels like a musical megazord. Like it feels like all these people that are distinct coming together and making something that they wouldn't make otherwise, like by themselves. And it feels very cohesive. It doesn't feel like there's seven people. It feels like,
yeah.
I mean, it feels like there's more than one, but also they feel like they're synchronized. I don't know how to explain it, but this album is really good. The whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I bet a lot of the people listening have not been exposed to Doomtree. They're probably the most obscure, though I would not call them obscure necessarily. They have a massive and rabid fan base. Um, but so I'll give some backstory here. Doomtree is a Minneapolis-based hip hop collective that consists of
Hmm.
two producers, Laserbeak and Paper Tiger, and five MCs: Sims, Cecil Otter, Mike McLawn, POS, and Dessa.
Hmm.
With a couple of the MCs, Cecil Otter and POS mainly, also sharing production duty. So, like I mentioned in the lessons episode, it could feel hectic. It
Yeah.
could feel confusing if they weren't so synchronized, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, now that I think about that, like, I think some of the best groups in hip hop, it seems like there's a lot of them, but then when they're together, it doesn't feel overwhelming. Like Wu Tang, God, there's what, like nine of them?
I think there's
You know,
724 members.
they add one every lunar year. This will be the yeah. I mean, there's at least nine.
Yeah.
I feel like,
hmm
but it doesn't feel that way. I mean, part of it is probably because not every single member is rapping on every single song. But even when they all are on a song, I don't know. It's just I think what one reason is because they feel different enough that it's not like that it's exciting to hear one of them come in. Like I think of the song Wu-Tang Clan Ain't Nothing to Fuck With now because we're talking about it, but having them duck in and out and then
Yeah.
like having them all come together on the chorus and then like, oh, here's the RZA, and then like it just works. And yeah, it's the same with this where like it really kind of feels like, I think I said this to you, but it really kind of feels like a jam session in the sense of like, the beat is going and like one of them is rapping and then another one picks it up right where they left off and another
hmm
one picks it up and they all just seem to be kind of rapping the same idea or verse, but it just flows like it's one person.
Yeah, it works really well. And the song in this lesson episode was Team the Best Team. It's from the album No Kings, which came out in November 2011. But I actually first encountered Doomtree through the MC POS, who's my favorite
Mm-hmm.
MC in the group.
Yeah.
And I met him at Scribble Jam 2009, which
Mm-hmm.
was a hip hop festival that used to happen in Cincinnati every year. And at the time, he was manning, like slinging merch at the Rhymesayers booth.
Mm-hmm.
So he was selling merch for Atmosphere. at the time. And that's how I came across him. My daughter and I actually, I don't know how old she was at the time, 12, I think. And,
Mm-hmm.
we went over to the Atmosphere booth, so I could introduce her to Slug, and we met POS there. So
Man.
small little hip hop world, and that's how I first encountered Doomtree. They released a bunch of mixtapes and EPs called False Hopes, and then their
Mm-hmm.
first crew album, Doomtree, at around that same time as I first encountered them. But it really wasn't until this album, No Kings, that I really became a big fan.
Mm-hmm.
And it maybe it's partly because of the, like, you can hear their evolution. I'm glad I had that like cursory knowledge of them through their False Hopes days. At the
Mm-hmm.
time, it was a little more of a like crunchy boom bap sound, like a lot of
Yeah.
Midwestern underground hip hop sounded at the time. Um,
Yeah.
but then you started to hear them evolve into what you just said. It sounds like a big jam session. It's like this mix of industrial pop,
Mm-hmm.
punk, jam band aesthetic. And what I liked the most about it is that it felt really urgent. Like this whole album
Yeah.
feels really urgent.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. It feels like if you're not paying attention, you'll miss a song.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
for me, especially at the time when this came out, having a daughter who was a teenager, and her entire life felt urgent at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a better way to describe the life of a teenager than feeling urgent,
Yeah.
but she really fell in love with this music too, partly because of POS, because he's this
Mm-hmm.
super charming MC, but then also in large part because of Dessa, who's this like super strong, powerful woman, and
Mm-hmm.
unabashedly so. So I, as a father, was immediately like, hell yes, latch on to
Yeah.
Dessa and what she's saying and what she embodies, because it's so fucking important.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely on this song, she got the best verse, I feel like. She had the standout verse. I mean, I really like POS's verse too. But I think I also just am more familiar with him. He was the only rapper that I actually knew out of the
Mm-hmm.
group. But I really like her verse at the end.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the coolest thing about them as a group is they don't seem to want to outshine each other all the time. I think
Mhm.
there's a power in that, like always trying to
Yeah.
one up the person before you. I
Yeah.
think there's a power in that, but they do a really great job of playing supporting roles when they need to. Like on this song, POS is mostly a supporting role, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and they let Mike McLaughlin have lots of the shine in this song.
Mhm.
I think it's really a brilliant, beautiful thing that for me speaks a lot to family.
Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy, right? Of like hip hop is meant to be competitive, and um I do think that there is something to be said about like competition bringing out the best in you, but also like you want to see your friends shine, like you want to see the people you care about do the best. And actually part of the reason that you are competitive with your family is that you want to bring out the best in them, but you don't always have to do that. Hip hop
Yeah.
can sometimes be not competitive, if you could
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Um, One of the other things I love about them and what makes it seem so much like family to me is that they're not completely like only in their own little unit. They have side
Yeah.
projects and they do other things with other people. And um, one of the biggest, which you might actually be familiar with,
Hmm.
is Laserbeak, the producer, who is like the coolest, nerdiest white dude you'll ever meet. I'm for the people watching on YouTube, I'm wearing a Laserbeak Tuesdays
Ah.
with Laserbeak shirt, which was his blog he had for a while. And so I was, super nerd fan. But he produced the first Lizzo album, or her first rap album, which was called Lizzo Bangers.
Hmm.
So that was a big part of why Lizzo became who she is now.
Man, it's called Lizzo Bangers.
It's called Lizzo Bangers. Yep. And he has a
Man,
series
I
of beat tapes called Lava Bangers. So that's where
hmm.
the Lizzo Bangers came from.
Dang, I actually don't know that. Really funny side note about Lizzo real quick. The reason that I discovered her was because I was listening to St. Paul and the Broken Bones a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a live version of A Change Is Gonna Come that they do, and Lizzo sings it with
Mm.
St. Paul. And yeah, at that time, yeah, I was just like, man, who's this lady that's like killing it with St. Paul? And then that's how I found that was Lizzo. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out just because I thought it was fun that was how I discovered her, was featuring with a totally different genre.
Yeah, she's brilliant. And I think Minneapolis music in general does that really well.
Yeah,
They're constantly collaborating with each other, and there's all these little spin-off groups, and
yeah.
it's so cool to watch. Um,
Hmm.
and to watch like people rise out of there. I've been aware of and watching the Minneapolis hip hop scene in particular for a lot of years.
Hmm.
And coming seeing Lizzo come up out of that and become this megastar that she's become is
Yeah.
really fucking cool. My daughter was a big fan of Lizzo, and we met her at an event called the Doomtree Zoo in St.
Hmm.
Paul. My daughter and I and my wife went to this big festival that Doomtree was throwing, and
Hmm.
Lizzo was just there hanging out in the crowd dancing. So I went over
That's
and talked to
awesome.
her, and introduced my daughter to her. And so I love that there are
That's
those female role models in
oh
hip
yeah.
hop, and especially attached to this music that my daughter and I were really bonding over.
Yeah, yeah. And you said something really interesting just now about how in that part of the Midwest hip hop scene, there's this tendency to go and make offshoot projects or go
Mm.
team up with these two people and then come back together. I think that's another thing that marks a good, healthy family is, again, it feels like a choice. Like,
Yep.
it isn't, you don't have to, Wu-Tang isn't always together, like they can go do their own things. I mean, we thought for the longest time, I still think Redman is part of Wu-Tang sometimes because him and
Yeah.
Method Man are together so often. But yeah, like they don't have to stay together to be good. They choose to stay together because they have a synergy. Obviously they are better together in some ways, but they're different together. Like they create something unique that we all like. So yeah, I think part of it needs to feel like a choice. Like you don't my favorite like groups in hip hop are ones where all the MCs or part pieces of it are all good on their own.
Yeah.
Like Run the Jewels is great because the two rappers are great on their own, but putting them together makes them even better by contrast.
Yeah, and I think being able to follow those individual stories, whichever direction they go, is
Mhm.
is really really powerful. There are certainly Doomtree fans that came because they were Dessa fans, that came because they were
Yeah.
Cecil Otter fans or Sims fans. Um, and being able to go to a POS show or a Dessa show, I've
Mhm.
seen both of them solo quite a few times, with my wife, with my daughter. Um, it's such a cool experience to be able to follow those individual storylines, but
Mhm.
then watch them come back together as one unit with this shared vision that's so powerful.
I, this is all everything is comic books for me because this is just making me think like this is like watching or like having an issue of X-Men and then Wolverine gets his own issues, and then Cyclops gets it. Yeah, like it's no different really in my mind of just yeah, because it just enriches the time that they have together, you know.
Yeah.
Part of being a part of a good family in my mind is having experiences of your own that you can bring back to the group, you know. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you do everything together, you're not going to have anything new to share between each other, and you're not going to create anything new if you're a music group. So I don't know, I almost feel like you have to, I mean, you don't have to, but I feel like it's better for the group if everybody has autonomy and stands alone and does their own thing. I mean, obviously you're going to have situations where it's like a Destiny's Child where one clearly is like the superstar
Sure,
and
sure.
um but I don't think that that has to be a bad thing, you know? I
No.
mean, it just and everyone I mean, even that example, Destiny's Child, like sure Beyonce's the super mega massive star, but Kelly and Michelle still had their own career slash have their own careers.
Right.
um yeah, so I mean it just I don't know, I think that that's an important part of family, which it makes me lean towards choosing my family more than like forcing myself in one, is that I need to feel like it's a choice, and I need to feel like I can do my own thing without them, and that
Mm-hmm.
I don't like I don't know, I don't need them. It's a yeah, this is like interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's a necessary part of a family unit, that one person, everyone can't be equal. You know, I think
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say. They can't be equal in the way that everyone else sees them. So
Yeah.
you know, there need to be people playing the supporting roles. There are going to be people who are more in a leadership role. There are going to be people
Yeah.
who are, you know, the more the face of the group, the face of the
Yeah.
family, whatever it is. Not everyone wants to play the same role. First off, you know,
Yeah.
not everybody wants to be a front man. So having those couple of superstars who are also willing to step back and play that supporting role when it's needed
Mhm.
is fucking huge, you know? And maybe they don't even realize they're doing this, but for me in particular, and I'm sure for other people, groups like Doomtree really created this space that my teenage daughter and I could bond over.
Mhm.
You know, my wife loved them, my daughter loved them, I loved them. We all had different favorites. Um, you know, we wanted to go to the shows together, um,
Aw.
to support and to see them, and they're this great example of what a family can be up on stage and out in the audience talking to everybody. Um, you know, being able to travel with my teenage daughter, you know, she's
Mhm.
16, 17, 18 years old. We're traveling together, like to all over the Midwest, Michigan, Chicago, Minneapolis,
Yeah.
for Doomtree shows, for Dessa shows, for POS shows. And being able to rock out at a show together, you know,
Mhm.
that's pretty fucking special for a dad and a teenage daughter to be able to do that on a regular basis.
That is pretty awesome. Yeah, you're kind of like like changing how I'm looking at going to shows, cuz typically like I will either A go to hip hop shit, well just music in general. I either go by myself or I'll like go with my friends, but when I'm there and I'm listening, I'm kind of in my own world. Like
Yeah.
I just get so singularly focused on the performance, you know. But as a result, like I'm very rarely like enjoying music with the person, and I hope that my friends that are listening to this don't hate me, but I'm just that's just how I've always looked at music. Like am I'll say I'm obsessed with music. I think that's a fair thing. And so like when when I'm seeing someone perform, particularly that I want to see perform, I'm just like so laser beam focused on them that I'm not even really taking in my surroundings or the people around me anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah, this idea of like we're gonna do this together, and like we both know the lyrics to this song, or we have a memory associated with this song. That's a that's part of what makes music so cool, I guess, is like the shared experiences, or just the different experiences, or experiencing it together, like blah blah blah. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to say that you're kind of making me rethink how I like digest music live, particularly.
Well, I think I do the same thing, and I think my daughter does the same thing, and I think my wife
Mm-hmm.
does the same thing. When we when we go to POS shows, you've
Mm-hmm.
met my wife.
Yeah.
She's very, very sweet, calm. But when we go to a POS show, she turns into this mad woman, and she needs to be front and center at the stage. She raps every lyric back at him
Yeah.
as fierce as he is rapping them.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
hilarious. She loses her fucking mind at POS shows, and I love that. I love watching POS. I love, as an MC myself, coming in and watching how he commands a room, how he owns the
Yeah.
fucking stage, how charming he is incredible to me. But then I also love to be able to watch how she interacts with it and how his music changes her. It's so
Yeah.
cool, and it's a similar thing watching my daughter at shows. We went to a Dessa show in Michigan, and
Mm-hmm.
number one, like, Dessa comes down off the stage and is rapping, and she sees my wife rapping all the lyrics, so she like
Yeah.
puts the mic in front of my wife. So Annalisa is rapping Dessa's song,
Yeah.
So she and my daughter are both going crazy. And I think Caitlin, my daughter, was like, I don't know, 16 at the time, I think. And like most 16-year-olds, she like wants to show all her friends that she was there. So she's got her cell
Mm-hmm.
phone out and she's recording Dessa performing
Mm-hmm.
and watching her cell phone, watching Dessa through the screen of her cell
Yeah.
phone. And I'm like, you know what? If you want to see that through a screen, you can watch it on YouTube tomorrow, because somebody else, one of the
Exactly.
other 70 people holding their phones up in here, is going to put it
Yeah.
on YouTube. Why don't you put your phone away and watch the show, experience the show? And
Yeah.
and she did. She was a little resistant and like, "You're so old, Dad," at first. But the next time Dessa came to Cincinnati, my wife and my daughter went together. I was out of town, and
Mm-hmm.
my wife told me after the show, she was like, Caitlin didn't even take her phone in to the venue.
Wow.
She left it in the car on purpose.
Nice.
So I think that kind of stuff is so, so cool. And it doesn't happen without Dessa, without POS, without Doomtree, for me anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, this might be where we sit on the other side of the jitter, like the gap of phones and not phones.
Yeah.
Because I'm on your side. I also think that I think we are too worried about losing memories. And I think a lot of times the memories we're worried about losing are ones we don't really want anyway.
Yeah.
Like, why do we need to remember every single thing that we've eaten? Like I don't know what we're gonna be like as grandparents. Like, cause
I
my
am a
granddad had
grandparent
like,
now, so I know what I'm going to be
oh,
like.
that's a good point. Yeah. Well, my granddad had like 5 photos of him ever.
Yeah, me
Like he's
too.
like, this is me when I was 13. This is me when I was 31. I'm like, wait, what happened in there? We don't know. Like, only he knows. And so that's how that was. But when I'm like 80, I'm gonna be like, what month do you want out of my life? Because
I
like
can
it's
scroll
like,
through Instagram and see.
yeah, like we just so yeah, I think that's a huge thing that I'm still trying to wrap my head around as I get older. But yeah, I learned pretty early on that there's more value in experiencing it as it happens than trying to capture it, because a lot of times when you try to capture it, you end up getting um disappointed in some way anyway. and yeah, like I think my compromise is I will take two pictures usually, like of the concert itself.
Mm-hmm.
And because I want to have some sort of documenting of like, oh yeah, this was a really cool lighting. Like I remember one time at an Atmosphere concert, the light was really cool at some point. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna take a picture. But other than that, I just really try to soak it in and yeah, just be super focused in the moment. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think that's I would love to hear the other side of that argument, because I'm sure there's merit to recording everything. But I just feel like if it's if you if you experience it, you're gonna remember it. You don't need to document it in case you forget it, because then you're not even experiencing it. So you do need to document it because you're not experiencing it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's interesting. I've been for the last year. I don't know if you and I have talked about this much, but for the last year or so, I've been really considering what like legacy looks like when a person is
mhm,
gone, and because I'm in this first generation of people who are creating this massive digital footprint, like
mhm,
when my grandparents died, I have a few photos of them. You know, I have
right,
no record of their voices. I have no video of
yeah,
them, just a handful of photos and the memories that I have.
mhm,
But when I die, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of hours of me talking on the internet, hundreds of
yeah,
hours of video, millions probably of photos, you know,
mhm,
and I'm not sure I like that idea.
mhm,
Um, I've met so many people whose memories are directly attached to a photo where they'll
mhm,
tell me a memory and then they're like, "Oh, I'll show you. You know, let me pull it up on my Instagram, you know."
yeah.
And I'm like, "So are you remembering the memory or are you remembering the photo?" Because they're
Mhm.
different things. Watching a concert through the screen of your phone while you record it is not the same as watching a concert,
Yeah.
experiencing a concert. So I've actually talked about, looked into, and considered wiping myself off the internet as
Is
part
that
of my
even
like last will and testament.
is that possible?
It's
Like, can you
possible. It's absolutely
wow.
possible. There are
That's in
companies that
yeah,
do it
'cause
for you.
oh, wow, 'cause yeah, I'm thinking in my head, like, once you put something on the internet, it gets copied and, like, it'll yeah, I guess I just didn't think it was possible to expunge yourself from the internet.
Yeah.
Um,
So I've considered that. But, you know, having this conversation also brings up some things that I think are really interesting. When I was looking for photos for this episode, I
mhm,
came across a photo of the Doomtree Zoo. The photo's taken from stage. It's
mhm.
of POS standing at the front of the stage with his arms up, and the crowd's going crazy. And you can see me, my wife, and my daughter in the crowd
Aw.
losing our minds, you know? And for me, that's kind of cool. Like, I didn't have a memory of that specific moment, but
Right.
seeing the photo did spark I remembered the feeling because of that. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't document that moment. Someone else
Mhm.
did. So it was interesting to see that. There's also one of my favorite photos is a photo that I did not take. Um, I tried to take the photo, but I couldn't figure out how to make it work. It was my
Yeah.
daughter had handed me her phone at a Dessa show and said, wanted me to take a picture of her and Dessa together.
Mhm.
And I couldn't get the phone to work. So Dessa
Oh,
just
no.
snatched the phone from me and took a selfie with my daughter. And that photo is very cool. Like it's a cool moment for her. She's beaming in the
Yeah.
photo with this, you know, this woman who's a great example for young women. And I
Mhm.
love that photo. So there are examples of it that I question, you know. Another one is my wife and I were driving back to Cincinnati from South Dakota on New Year's.
Mhm.
Um, we bought tickets for a Doomtree show on New Year's Eve in Iowa. So we stop in Iowa for New Year's Eve. We watch this show. The show's incredible. And I'm like, I want to have them all sign this book, this little notebook I
Yeah.
brought with me for Caitlin. So we weasel our way backstage and get everybody to sign the book. There's a photo of me with the whole group, minus Dessa, she was not there, but with all the guys
Hmm.
in the group, backstage in their dressing room, hanging out with them. And for my daughter, that photo is a very cool thing. Like,
Yeah.
here's this rap group she loves, and here's her dad with the rap group. I
Yeah.
think for her that's a really special thing. So I have mixed feelings.
Yeah, and that's why I say, like, with stuff like that, I will always allow myself a couple of photos, or like if there's a particularly unique moment, I very rarely will film, but if there's a particularly unique
Hmm.
moment, I'll pull out my video record, because I don't think it's an either or. I think you can do both. I just think that being intentional is the thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
that photo captures a specific moment that stands out, like, you made me think of a photo I took at I used to go to Riot Fest every year in Chicago, and
Hmm.
one year Rise Against was playing, and Rise Against is one of my favorite bands of all
Sure.
time.
Of course.
And so it was like I took the photo at this moment because it was like so picture perfect. Like, it was starting to rain, and it was like, you remember that Linkin Park video where they're like, I think it's like in the end, where it's like raining and like they're hitting the drums and like the water's
Yep.
coming out.
Yep.
That's what it was like watching Rise Against play. And I took the photo at that moment because it just felt so cinematic and like perfect, like I was just like, I have to get a picture of this. And so now when I look at that photo, it's not necessarily even a good photo, but when I look at it, I immediately go back to
Yeah.
being covered in mud and rain and listening to a bunch of music about tearing down the system. It's
You
just one of
know,
my favorite things to
eh,
listen to.
absolutely, absolutely. You just made me connect some dots that I had never really considered, but I do appreciate. So thank you for saying that it's all about being intentional. Um,
Hmm.
like many things in life, I think we like encounter something and then we want to recreate it over and over and over.
Yep.
So if you're really intentional about the moments that you're taking photos of, which is how it started, film
Mhm.
was expensive to develop.
Yeah.
You get a couple of shots and then you're done. You can't take
Hmm.
it. Christmases when I was a kid, you couldn't take 3,000 photos.
Hmm.
There were going to be 6 photos of Christmas morning. Um, so you had to be really intentional about those moments you were taking photos of, and
Hmm.
and as a result, we often took photos of the things that were going to be good memories.
Yeah.
I think because of the ease of cameras, we've all got one in our pockets. Um, we want to recreate that. Like, we want to make more memories by taking more photos. We're trying to,
Exactly.
come at
Yeah.
it from the back. And that's not really how it works. So, what ends up
Yep.
happening, I think, is that many of the photos we take, we mistake as memories when we're really
Ah.
remembering the photo.
Yep.
But
Yep.
there are certainly times, like you're talking about, where you're intentional about it. You take a photo of a memory, and that allows you to spark that memory. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Y-
Maybe I won't wipe myself off the internet when this is all over.
It depends. Yeah, I guess it depends, right? Like, if there's specific things, yeah, like moments that you're capturing. Cause yeah, like that photo that I was talking about, it was not about the photo itself. It
Yeah.
was just that I took it because I wanted to remember that feeling that I was currently having.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that, I don't know. I think there's always I always tend to think there's a middle ground. There's usually not. It's usually not either or. There's usually some mixture or spectrum that you can sit on. And with photos, I'm like on the far side, where with concerts, where like I don't need to take 100 million photos because I want to experience the concert, but I will take photos of very specific things that I think are cool, or feelings that I'm having, or a person that I meet. Like, obviously, if I meet Lupe Fiasco at a Lupe concert, I'm gonna take a picture with him. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just being intentional and really like, this is a memory. I'm having a memory, like not,
Yeah.
not I'm gonna form the memory.
Yeah. Another note on, this same line of thinking. In the lessons episode, I mention,
Hmm.
um, I talk about Mike McLawn. When his verse begins, he always seemed kind of like the odd man out in the group for me. He
Hmm.
was a little harder than everyone else, a little more chaotic than everyone else, which I liked, but
Yeah.
he seemed like the odd man out. And then seeing them in concert, I saw the way they operated together, and particularly at the Doomtree Zoo, during Mike's verse on "Team the Best Team,"
Hmm.
I watched Mike start his verse, and everyone else in the group became a fan of Mike's. Like they had
Yeah,
so much
that's cool.
admiration and respect for him as an MC that they all stopped what they were doing and just became fans of Mike for the length of his verse. And it
Yeah.
made everybody else in the audience do the same. Like if we had
Yeah.
seen him as the odd man out before, all of a sudden we were like, "Oh, that's why he's the odd man out, because he's better than all of them and they all want to
Yeah.
rap like him." And when I was looking through photos during this episode doing some research,
Hmm.
I came across a photo of that moment at that concert.
Dang, that's
Um,
cool.
that was in the Minneapolis Press or something. Um, I'll make sure we post that photo in the blog for this episode. You can clearly see what I'm depicting, what I'm talking about in the lessons episode of, like POS standing really close to him and just being in awe of it, and you
Yeah.
know everybody just being a fan on stage. It's so cool to watch, and I think it goes back to what you said about admiring and respecting the people that you keep
Hmm.
around you, and it ties right into this memories idea. So I love it.
Absolutely. That's really cool. I also think, just on a side note, that I think in groups like that you do have to have the wild one.
Yeah.
Wu-Tang had ODB,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? He's very, I mean, the RZA to an extent too, but really ODB was vastly different than like a Ghostface or an Inspector
For
Deck.
sure.
But they needed him, like he was a very key part of their chemistry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that having a wild card where you're like, are you sure you came to the right classroom, sort of feel, is important for a group, especially a group that big, like five or more. Like a duo I think has its own chemistry, but I think with a large group, I would consider like five or more large, like that there has to be one person that kind of is like the quote unquote weird one,
Yeah. Yep. Totally. Every family's
um
got one.
yeah, that's also a good point about family. There's always the weird uncle or whatever it is. One question I did want to ask you, Kris, about this is, I'm enjoying this album, like, 12 years after it was made, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't like, it was very different than the music I was listening to before it. And I'm just curious, like, how different was this like sound than the other hip hop music, whatever, that you were currently listening to at that time? Like, how
Mm.
different was it for 2011 versus, for me in 2022? It's obviously different.
I mean, I think it was a similar experience for me at the time. Like, there was something so industrial and punk
Mm-hmm.
infused in this album that it didn't, to me, sound like anything that was out. It did sound like a pretty clear, if I was paying attention, it was a pretty
Mm-hmm.
clear line from their False Hope stuff through
Mm.
POS's Never Better. And, it took pieces from all of the individuals and turned it into this thing.
Yeah.
Laserbeak has these great pop sensibilities, hence
Mm-hmm.
Lizzo. Um,
Yep.
so seeing all that come to like gel together in this album and in their subsequent albums, their sound changes, but it's a pretty clear, direct line through it,
Yeah.
which I think is very cool. And I could maybe compare it in some ways to some other Midwestern hip hop that was happening.
Hmm.
I could draw some comparisons to some Atmosphere things, to some
Hmm.
Lupe things,
Yeah.
but it was such a unique sound. I think it really stood on its own, even back then. Probably a similar experience to that you're having with it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I even said to you that it actually would have fit in really well with what I was listening to at the time, because at that time, 2011, actually around the time that that Rise Against photo was taken, I was heavy into like post-hardcore punk, some
Mm-hmm.
metal, like that was primarily what I was listening to at that time. So this actually would have fit right in with what I was listening to then, and like um it's timing is such an important thing with music, like you might listen to something, the obvious answer is like you can listen to something and then 10 years later listen to it and not like it as much as you did then. But the opposite can happen too, like you
Exactly.
can find something and it might just not be for you in that moment, but
Mm-hmm.
then you come back and you're like, oh my god, like I remember this, but I don't remember it being this good. I think that this would have resonated with me. I still think it's a great album, but I actually think it would have resonated with me more when it came
Mm.
out, because I was already in that punk. I mean, actually, I part of what drew me to that was Lupe a little bit, because on the Cool, he has at least one song that's pretty much just a punk song. Like I
Mm.
think it's Hello Goodbye, that's
Yeah.
on there. And then for a while he even had like a punk band, Japanese Cartoon. So yeah, I think I was already being drawn that direction anyway, and I was heavy into it in the 2010, 11, 12 era. So yeah, I was just curious what you'd say, because it was so different for me now compared to all the other sounds that we have. Like hip hop doesn't usually have that live sound anymore. Um
Totally.
so yeah, I don't know. Just a cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it hit me at a time when I was like trying to model for my daughter best I could, that being who she wanted to be was the most important thing.
Mhm.
Um, and I think this was a really powerful way to say that without saying it directly to her, because a teenage kid, the reaction of saying it directly to them is going to be, yeah, whatever, I know that.
Yeah, you're lame.
Exactly. So thanks, Doomtree, for doing that for me.
Oh shoot. Another thing about the way this album sounds that would have really hit with me 10 years ago especially is one of the reasons I loved rock and metal and punk at that time is that it was another way for me to process music. I was used to being
Mm,
so literal about it with hip hop, where I
mm-hmm.
was I was listening to every single word, trying to interpret where it was going to go, like paying attention to rhyme schemes, like but with that kind of music, I generally don't pay attention to the words at all. Like I'm just focused on the feeling behind it, and certain phrases will stick out, but for the most part I'm just focused on the wall of sound, I guess. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what this album feels like to me, is like it's this wall of sound, like a train that I'm just on, and every now and then there's a stop that we pass that I recognize, and that's like the lyrics, of
Yep.
like, oh, like even the greatest dancers in the world are bound, like that sticks out, but the
So
rest of it
good.
is just like it's a locomotive, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just on for the ride. So yeah, it really transported me back to that like 10 years ago period where I was not even listening to lyrics. I was just based totally on feel and like emotion.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love it when that coincides with also having great lyrics. Like you can
Yeah,
tear apart
exactly.
all the pieces of the song and it's all brilliant.
Mhm.
So, with that in mind, let's talk favorite bars. What do you got?
Yeah, I think I always give it away. Knowing the greatest dancers in the world are bound to leave the dance floor. That's
So good.
I feel like a lot of the songs we've been talking about relate somehow to dying and like accepting
Mm.
age, but yeah, that stuck out. And then I know I'm not getting the cadence of it right, because like I said, honestly, I hear it in context. But the beginning of, I think it's Dessa's verse, where she says shake shake shoot, it's like win
Mm-hmm.
draw lose, and then something about like
Because dice
um
kept cooped up, just bring bad luck. Man is made to
yeah,
choose.
it's the same. Like, I mean, I've probably said it a million times in our recording today, but just I love the idea of like, we are made to choose, like, don't hesitate, like, just make choices. I mean, kind of to relate to our a couple of episodes ago, talking about just putting holds on the wall, like just making your
Yeah.
choices and being willing to learn, rather than wanting to get everything perfectly or being afraid of getting it wrong, you know? So I love
Mm-hmm.
that, especially really stuck out to me, because I was just like, yes, we're made to choose.
Yeah,
What about
I
you?
agree completely. I wish that Dessa had more time in this song. Like she's got this
Yeah.
really short verse, and coincidentally or incidentally, this is not my favorite song from this album by any means. Um,
Yeah.
I love the whole album, but one of the reasons I chose this song to highlight was because it had all the MCs in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it really, and they all have really standout parts. Um,
Yeah.
Live, that version, that moment you're talking about with Cecil Otter
Mm-hmm.
is so incredible live. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but Dessa's really short verse for me is the winner here, and
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say her entire verse is
That's
my
fair.
favorite. But I
Yeah.
really do love. I love that line for the visual, the shake, shake, shoot. It's like win, draw, lose, because dice kept cooped up. Just bring bad luck. Man is made to choose. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But something for me about like when that happens and then it's followed up by really great lyrics that you don't quite pay attention to until later is
Yeah.
really cool. Um, and at the end of her verse, she says, because the river can't know when the levee might go. So
Yeah.
draw your arm and throw. That for me is so fucking good. Like
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to happen. So just
Yeah.
fucking do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, that's a lesson that I think really all of us could stand to remember, of like um plant, like, even just how we think about life in general. Um I think that we spend too much time planning for the future sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, even just like the idea of retirement, like what, like that has always seemed crazy to me, of like planning for retirement. I get that you're supposed to not like, I mean, you don't want to be stupid and like blow everything in the moment, but I've never understood the idea of saving for retirement. Cause I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to live to be 60, whatever. And I'm not saying that I'm like on some bender, but I'm just saying that you literally don't know. So why would I guess just when I thought about like the structure of my life and what sort of career I wanted to have, quote unquote career, I was always much more like, especially as I became like in mid 20s or so, I was like, I'd
Mm-hmm.
rather just do what is making me happy right now. Like, I'd rather focus on that and then sort of kind of think about the future, because we literally don't know what's going to happen in like 20 years or 40 years or
We don't know what's
whatever.
going to happen
So
tomorrow. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm going to throw a wrench in the works here a little bit. I think that this advice is planning for the future, in that
Hmm.
you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And if you sit on an idea, if you sit on a thing, if you make something and don't put it out there, if you
Yeah.
don't draw your arm and throw,
Yep.
you're never going to evolve. You're never going to get past
Exactly.
this moment. So I want to evolve. I want to get to the next
Yeah.
moment. I want to see what happens. So I'm going to draw my arm and throw. I'm going to put this thing out there, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing, and keep
Absolutely.
building, keep evolving. So for me, this is part of planning for the future, is doing the things I want to do, putting them out there for the world, and then
Hmm.
making the next thing.
That's actually a really profound way to look at it, because that that's a lesson that I had to learn about being a rapper or an artist is, I had to let go of the idea of like, oh, it's not good enough, I'm not going to put it out yet, because like you'll never get better. Like if you
Yeah.
never put the thing out, you're only, this isn't the best way to phrase it, but you'll understand what I mean, is that you're only as good as your body of work. Like as an artist,
Mm.
the only way that you can be judged as an artist is by the things that you've made, not by the things that you're going to make or might make or wanted to make but didn't. Like what is literally on the page or like done out there is what people can absorb and experience. And yeah, so like just the same thing with life. The only way that you're going to like live a life is by living it, like by doing things, by having experiences, good and bad,
Yep.
and like taking chances and going like, oh, well, that maybe wasn't the best choice, but I'm going to make it work. Or like, oh, that
Yeah.
actually was a good risk that I took. I'm so much for like just taking the risk, even though most risks make me uncomfortable, just taking it and seeing literally just seeing what happens.
Well, I think without putting the thing out there, it's an incomplete experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
You never get the feedback. You never have
Mm-hmm.
a reason to readjust your experiment.
Yeah.
And that's how we grow. So, complete the experiment.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, we got bars, man. This episode's
To-
been bars. I just gotta
Today
say.
especially, yeah. I don't know what we're on. I mean, I guess we're getting better, right? Like, well, this is the most we've recorded of the podcast thus far by rule. And yeah, we've just gotten better every time, I feel like.
Absolutely. All right. You all know what it is. Every other week, we release short lessons episodes. These are highly produced essays with beats by Devin that are something like little songs on their own. There might end up, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag a little bit here. There might end up being a YouTube mixtape playlist that includes all of these lessons episodes at the end of this season. Maybe if I can get it to work the way we want it to work, we'll see. But for now, you can only hear those lessons episodes on Spotify. We've got all of the links, the videos, the photos, all the bonus material at the blog post for these episodes at hiphoptaughtmeeverything.com. Go check those out. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And we will see you next time when the best rapper alive teaches me business.
Controversial. I like it. Good work there. Oh my gosh.